Today's topic is really interesting topic. Did Shree Rama eat meat? Now, if you just want to know what that specific verse in the thumbnail means, then you can just go to this particular timestamp. But if you want to know the full picture, my perspective, the content, the nuances that nobody is actually talking about, then I really recommend you watching this whole video because this topic is genuinely fascinating to me and I think it will be for you as well. So let us get started. Did Shree Rama actually eat meat? The very first thing that I want to put forward before anything else is this. The supreme thing here is actually devotion, not a book. And I want you to really sit with that for a moment because this changes the entire way we should approach this question. Consider a person who does not know Sanskrit, who never read the Valmiki Ramayana, who does not know what actually is written in it, but this person has a very deep, sincere devotion to Rama. The Rama they worship, the Rama they believe in may be different from anything written in the text. My question to you is this person not a good devotee? Think about it. Leave your answer in the comments section, but my belief is, yes, he is a really good devotee because devotion is the first thing. Everything else comes after it. I remember a verse, I think it is from Padma Purana, though I'm not entirely certain, in which Narada actually asks Vishnu, where do you actually reside? What is your home? And Vishnu replies, Naham vasami vaikunthe yoginam hridayena cha mad bhaktayatra gayante tatra tisthami Narada. It's basically saying that I do not reside in Vaikuntha. I do not reside in the hearts of yogis. I reside wherever my devotees actually sing my name. This is what I'm trying to convey. If the devotee is actually not there, if nobody is actually singing, nobody is worshipping, then in a sense, the deity has no presence. The deity lives on the people. The deity lives through devotion. So that is my foundation for this entire conversation. Hold it in your mind as we go forward because it is going to get really interesting here. Now, the second thing that I want to put forward is we can question the authority of the text itself. Now, this might be really controversial, but hear me out. We cannot say with certainty that any given version of the Ramayana was written by Valmiki exactly as it stands today, unaltered, with no any interpolation, no addition, no any changes across thousands of years of copying and transmission. That is very difficult to establish, right? Maybe impossible as well, we never know. Let me give you a parallel example. You know Kalidasa, the great Sanskrit poet. Now, scholars are not even fully certain which plays were actually written by Kalidasa. Different plays appear to come in different time periods. And there's a real possibility that some of what is attributed to Kalidasa was actually written by multiple people across different eras. And the name of Kalidasa was actually attached to him. Which is frankly a very strange situation, but it is actually a real situation as well. The same kind of phenomenon is very possible with Ramayana. Whatever Valmiki originally composed, it went through a very long period of transmission, 2,000-3,000 years. During that time, things can change, lines can be added, regional versions develop, right? At that particular time, photocopier was not there, so basically people used to copy by hands, and scholars actually used to copy by hands as well. And they could insert any shloka they actually wanted for extrapolating a particular story, basically establishing their regional traditions. Now, because this is a dharmic text, because it is a sacred epic, people are really reluctant to be critical about it in this particular way. But I do not think that reluctance is actually necessary because, as I said, devotion is the first thing, and devotion does not require us to be intellectually dishonest about a text. I actually think all of the deities in our tradition are actually living deities, so being honest about the text does not threaten the deity, it never could as well. Now let us talk about Sanskrit itself, because Sanskrit is really complex language. It is like chess. The base rules are not difficult, but the game becomes really difficult, extraordinarily difficult if you want it to make. And when it comes to interpreting Sanskrit texts, there are at least 3 distinct layers at which ambiguity can arise. 3 layers at which people play with meaning. Layer 1 is actually linguistic ambiguity. The first layer is basically linguistic layer. You simply play with the words. For example, let us take the word Suraghata. Many people say it is Suraghata, not Sura Aghata. Now, I'm not talking about whether or not this is consistent with the surrounding verses or the broader context of the chapter. I'm just talking about one word in isolation. They say this word can mean different things. Let me give you a parallel in English. The word flesh. According to Oxford English Dictionary, flesh means meat. It also means the soft pulp of a fruit. Both are legitimate meanings of the same word, but think about how you can actually use the word flesh in everyday English. If you write he ate the flesh, nobody pictures a mango. For the fruit meaning to be clear, you have to specify the flesh of a mango, the flesh of this particular fruit. You need to make the context really explicit. And I think the same principle applies here. If Valmiki, who writes in very clear, simple, accessible Sanskrit, not the ornate complexity of Kalidasa, I think if Valmiki meant fruit pulp, then he would have given you enough context to know what is that he actually meant. A deliberate ambiguity like this would be really poor writing, and I do not think Valmiki was a really poor writer. The second layer is actually philosophical, and this one is more sophisticated and more interesting. Here is an example. This is a very well-known shloka from Bhagavad Gita. Vasamsi jirnani yatha vihaya. This particular shloka that is in the screen. The common interpretation of this particular verse is that it talks about punarjanma, rebirth. The soul leaving the body, taking up another, the way a person changes clothes, and so on and so on. But Acharya Prashant's interpretation of the same verse is actually quite different. It is derived partly from Advaita Vedanta and partly from his own inquiry, what I would call swa-vichara-aropanam, the imposition of one's own reflective thought into the text. He changes the philosophical frame entirely. Now, I'm not saying that his interpretation is wrong. It is genuinely interesting. It is internally consistent with a lot of other things. But what I'm pointing is that at philosophical level, the same verse can support very different readings depending on the lens you bring to it. And when a commentator is looking at a verse about Rama and meat, and they personally believe that Rama would have never eaten meat, they would find a philosophical frame that supports that belief. That is how interpretation actually works. Now, the third layer is contextual ambiguity, and this is when someone references earlier verses in the same text, earlier promises, earlier statements, and uses that context to actually argue that a later verse must mean something different than its surface reading. And in Ramayana, this is very relevant because there are actually multiple places in the Ramayana where Rama explicitly promises to eat only fruits and roots during his Vanavasa, his forest exile. These verses are clear. They appear consistently across manuscript. Rama is saying, I'll live simply, I'll eat as a hermit. So when later verses appear that seem to describe meat in Rama's presence, people use those earlier promises to say this must mean something else. It cannot mean what it looks like. The earlier context forbids it. This is the third layer, and it interacts with the first two. People mix linguistic games, philosophical framing, and contextual argument all at once, layering them on top of each other. Now let us talk about the actual verse in the thumbnail, the one that has been mentioned, the one that has been circulating, and the one Dhruvrati has also mentioned in this particular video. This verse is actually not even directly about Rama's diet, and here's the thing, a lot of critical scholars of Ramayana actually say that this particular verse is a regional interpolation. What does that mean? It means that this particular verse does not appear in all of the manuscript. It appears in some regional versions, but not on the others. It is not consistent across the textual tradition, and because of that, there is a strong argument that it was added later by someone somewhere in a particular reason, and it's not part of the original composition. Now to say something about Dhruvrati here. Dhruvrati in that particular video did not mention this, which is generally surprising for me because in another video he himself acknowledges that the entire Uttarakanda, the seventh and the final book of the Ramayana, is widely considered to be later interpolation. He says it clearly, so his research team clearly knows this. It would have been commendable if he added at least one sentence rather than being too selective about this particular thing. Also, Nityananda Mishra's video has done really good work in this particular topic. He has made a detailed video in which he cites multiple commentators, and some of whom say that this particular verse is a regional interpolation, others of whom argue that this particular verse means something different. Now, here is my personal position. The commentators who try to argue that Mamsa here does not mean meat, I do not agree with them. I think they are doing swa-vichara-aropanam. They are just projecting their own prior beliefs onto the text. Think about it this way. The word Suraghata, which appears in the verse alongside Mamsa, is very, very clear in what it refers to. If you just write Suraghata, then readers know exactly what it means. It is not subtle. And Mamsa alongside it is similar as well. The linguistic game of saying, no, this means something else. In this particular verse, I think it is not credible. The letters are letters and the words are just the words. The main problem with this is you can go absolutely crazy and make any verse mean anything in Sanskrit, because the nature of Sanskrit is really fluid. And this is what I think is analysis paralysis. Some commentators go to extraordinary lengths to make these words mean something other than what they actually say. And honestly, it is a little insane. It is clear it means what it means, right? So my position is that this verse is most likely a regional interpolation. That is the strongest and most honest argument available, not the linguistic games and not the philosophical reframing. Just this particular verse is probably, it shouldn't be there, basically that, right? So if this is the case, then the whole controversy is going to collapse. For other verses that involve meat in different contexts in Ramayana, there are nuances, there are things to be saved, but I think in another video I won't delve in this particular video specifically. So, did Shree Raama eat meat? What I hope this particular video gives you is not just an answer to a clickbait question. I hope that it gives you a way of thinking about sacred texts with honesty, with humility, and without feeling like your faith depends on one verse meaning one thing. You can look at Ramayana clearly. You can say some of this verse may have been added later, some of this is ambiguous, some of this I don't fully understand, and still have devotion in Shree Raama completely. Those two things are not in conflict. If you watched till here, thank you. Really. Leave a comment. Thank you.